welcome everybody. Welcome to today's session. We are very excited to have you here. I am Amna Imtiaz and I'm the Manager of Customer Success here at mConsent, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. And I'm very excited to have you all here. So for anyone who is new here and needs more information about who we are, I would like to take a few moments to, introduce you to our company and introduce you to these sessions as well. mConsent is actually a healthcare workflow and payments platform that is built specifically for dental and orthodontic practices. So we help teams modernize intake, they help their communication, streamline compliance, and long-term payment workflows as well. We do this all the while reducing operational friction for their staff and improving the patient experience, because that's what matters at the end of the day more than anything else. And for that purpose, actually, we have launched these community connection series. And the intention behind this is for these sessions to actually be educational and conversational as well. It's a chance to connect with you guys. And these sessions actually focus on real challenges practices face every single day. And we try to provide practical insights you can take back to your team and streamline your operations. And for today's session, we are actually very excited to welcome you and introduce you to something that we are very excited about. And this session is actually inside the ortho practice. We will be diving into real operational challenges orthodontic practices face and how modern workflows can help solve them. So for today's session, the main focus is going to be on one of the most overlooked areas of orthodontic growth, collecting payments. Specifically the lack of structured follow-up systems, any unnecessary merchant fees to the practice, the risks and compliance issues of storing payment information in a spreadsheet or, utilizing any manual tools as well. So all of that will be covered by our speakers today. Before we dive in, though, I do want to mention a few housekeeping notes. Number one, this session is being recorded and we'll save time at the end for next steps and resources as well that will be provided to you guys. This is an interactive session and we encourage you very much to participate. If you have any questions, have any ideas you would like to share, or just be a part of the conversation, please feel free to drop them into the chat at any time. We'll be monitoring your responses during the session. And at the end, we have a time saved for any Q&A or any other conversations that you would like to have with the team. And also, there is a resource section that you should be able to utilize, and you can actually access speaker details and links for resources as well. But before we move further, I'm actually very excited to introduce today's speakers to you guys as well. We have wonderful people here from our team. We have Zach Lopez here, who's our Vice President of Sales. Zach helps our teams, different orthodontic practices and dental practices, streamline their operations and work with different clients to figure out payment solutions as well. Not only that, we actually have a very exciting guest here today, Daniel Sid, who is going to be our guest speaker here. Just to give you a bit more detail about who Zach and Daniel are. So basically, joining Zach is Daniel Sid. He specializes in financial infrastructure behind orthodontic and dental practices. The main focus of his work is actually on establishing robust recurring payment systems, compliance-driven workflows, long-term financial accuracy. He also helps practices to align payment operations and internal controls with day-to-day clinical workflows. He helps leadership teams improve predictability. That in turn reduces friction, and that helps them make better financial decisions all in all. But very excited to have them both here today. I'm going to hand it over to you, Zach, to get the conversation started with Daniel.
Awesome. Thank you. Really appreciate that. And again, welcome in Daniel, our speaker today. We appreciate you joining us. So I will go ahead and just jump right in because I'm interested in a little bit more about you, Daniel. So to kick us off, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about what originally pulled you into working with orthodontic and dental practices in general, and specifically the operations and the financial side of that.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for having me today. Really excited to be here, guys. Well, you've probably heard the story before. The way I started in the dental industry was sort of by accident. About 15 years ago, my dentist became a really good friend. And at the time I was in business school. And so he was needing some help with his practice. And everything that I was learning in school, he was allowing me to apply in his business. And so that friendship grew over time. I met a lot of his friends, who also had practices. And I started seeing a consistent and recurring theme, which was there was a disconnect between great doctors that they were and the financial and fragile systems that they had in place in their offices. So what I mean by that is a lot of them were stressed out because there was not enough cash flow, perhaps, or they were asking about how am I going to make payroll this coming week, and things of that nature. So naturally, because I was studying finance, I focused on solving those problems systematically.
Okay, absolutely. And over the years, what patterns would you say that you started noticing when it came to how practices handled payments for long-term treatment plans?
Well, one of the biggest things that we see in whether it is an orthodontic practice or also just general practitioners, we see a lot of fragmentation. So we see that collecting payments has become this huge task that is spread out across different platforms. It could be spreadsheets, it could be card terminals, different card terminals or processors. It could be, sticky notes, or just even relying on the memory of the manager who is the responsible one for running the payments, or whoever that may be. So we haven't really seen a lot of systems in place, and there is a lack of accountability for follow-ups. That is one of the major issues that we see in the practices. And perhaps having everything on paper and relying on somebody else to do it manually is not the best solution to collect those payments that we want coming into the practice.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Well, I'd like to start with kind of building off of that. Something that, I see all the time, but we here also see all the time is, most orthodontic treatments span between 12, 18, or even sometimes 24 months. But many practices, they don't actually have that structured follow-up system in place. Once the patient leaves the office, kind of referring to what you were just talking about. From your experience, what would you say happens when a practice doesn't have that formal follow-up or that payment follow-up process in place?
Great question. So what's going to happen is that those failed payments are going to start accumulating quietly. So if you think about it, a single failed charge that, didn't go through for whatever reason doesn't feel like it's something urgent. It doesn't feel like it's a big deal, right? But not having a system that's going to flag it, not having a system that can tell us if it's been a few months that that payment hasn't gone through, that's going to be the real challenge and the real issue. By the time we notice, and specifically in orthodontic offices, by the time we notice that many payments have been missed, kind of getting that collection is going to become more difficult. Just think about it this way: if you're a patient, right, Zach, and you, for whatever reason, the payments failed, right? Perhaps the card changed, and now you come back to the office a few months after because you were on vacation, and you come to the front and they say, "Hey, you missed 5 payments. Now you owe me, I don't know, $600-700." That's going to be a little bit more difficult to collect than if it was just one missed payment. So not having that follow-up system is really hurting the practices. And we see two types of offices. One type is the ones that run the payment, and then they only run it whenever the patient comes into the office. So if the patient didn't come in for a few months, you're missing out on that cash flow, you're missing out on that revenue. The second type of office is the type of office that will automatically run the payment. By the way, these offices typically have a little bit better cash flow, higher profits as well, but they still lack a system that flags those past due balances. So whenever we don't have a structured follow-up system, practices can easily leave tens of thousands of dollars uncollected.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I guess my follow-up question to that would be, what kind of risks does that create, not just financially, but operationally for the team? Obviously, you answered some of that, a little bit there, but could you go a little bit more in depth on that? What kind of risks that would create?
Yeah, of course. Let's think about it. So the main problem is going to be that it creates inconsistencies, right? So different teams they're going to handle things differently. So your manager might have certain policies that she can follow and she can make certain determinations, but some other front staff members are not going to have the same leeway. So if we're talking about specifically about the operational stability of the team, that's going to be lacking if we don't have something in writing and if we don't train everybody to follow the same steps.
I see. Another issue that comes to mind when I think about, the payments and, the process of collecting payments is going to be the merchant fees. I know a lot of practices, they accept cards for the monthly payments without fully realizing how much they're losing over time. So in your opinion, how big of an impact do the merchant fees actually have on the orthodontic practices that rely heavily on those reoccurring payments, especially if those are, ranging between 2 to 3%?
It's a big impact. And the problem with that is that we don't realize it's a big impact. Here's the thing. Self-reported offices, like on surveys, they report that their average collection for an orthodontic practice in the US is about $1.5 million, right? So let's do some math with these numbers. So $1.5 million, and if about 70% of that revenue comes from recurring payments, you're talking about a little bit over $1 million per year that comes through processing those card payments for which you are being charged a fee. That fee, let's assume it's about, let's be a little bit conservative and let's say it's 2.75%. Even at 2.75%, which by the way, it could go, depending on the card, it could go up to 4%. 2.75% in a year of collecting about a little bit more than a mil, you're talking about almost $30,000. Wow. But what we don't realize with those $30,000, that's per year. Orthodontic practices are going to keep patients bonded for about 18 to 24 months. So let's say 2 years. So with that same group of patients that you're collecting $1 million cards, you are forgetting the time horizon. So it's not just 1 year that we're losing $30,000. It's going to be 2 years, even 3 years, because some treatments, go longer. It's not unusual in orthodontics. So yes, there is a lot of money being lost. So in 3 years, you're close to $90,000 that just went away. And we're not realizing that that money is going away because we're not doing the math, right? We call it cost of business. But in reality, that is just friction that we can eradicate by implementing the correct systems and establishing the right protocol.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, $90,000 is not chump change by any means.
Yeah, it's a lot of money, definitely.
Absolutely. So with that said, I mean, in your opinion, what do you think, or why, I should say, why do you think practices tolerate those fees and for so long, for one, and why don't they reassess them? I mean, what's the catch there?
Yeah, so even a few years back, any merchant, right, that would pass on fees to its customers or patients, we thought that those patients or customers were going to be lost. But we've seen a change in the market in which even if you go to the gas station, if you want to pay with a credit card or any card, it's going to tell you there's going to be an added fee. If you're paying your bills, it's going to say, hey, if you want to use a card, it's going to be added fees. So the issue with those fees to the orthodontic practice is that they are actually invisible. Let me use an example that everybody can relate to. Companies like Care Credit, right? They're a merchant. What they do is they allow you to run payments through their platform, and then they charge you a fee, right? Same as the bank. Now, for Care Credit, it's a lot higher, 10, 15%. But the problem is that if you run $1,000 with a merchant like that, and they took their 15% upfront, what they deposit to your bank is just net. It's not the gross amount. It's not the $1,000 that you charge the patient. It's going to be the balance of that net amount once they took out their fees. So when we're doing the accounting part and we're doing the profit and loss, a lot of times you don't see a line for merchant fees. Why? Because the banks are taking their portion before they deposit the net amount into the bank account of the business. So it's invisible. Nobody knows that, hey, there was a fee that we paid. Nobody knows how much it was because, we never saw it. It never hit the bank. And so most merchants work that way. One way, if you're a doctor and you're listening to this right now, one thing that I encourage you to do is look at your merchant statement on a monthly basis. And yes, that I know that requires work because you're going to have to probably log into your merchant dashboard or website and then go look for that statement. And that's on purpose, by the way, that they make it a little bit hard. If you get in the mail, open it every month and kind of start adding up how much you're paying in merchant fees because it's going to add up over time. So yeah, it's an invisible expense and we don't see it unless we look for it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you're seeing all of the funds come into the bank account without seeing the fees, you're probably not initially thinking about that, especially if it's not something you're used to taking a look at or tracking.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. When it comes to the next thing that I wanted to discuss a little bit, Daniel, it's going to be how payments are actually stored as well. So, I mean, my main goal is to try to touch on as many things that I see, throughout the day when I'm talking to orthodontic practices. But I still see that ortho practices are storing payment details like in Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets, shared documents. I see a smile there. So
sticky notes.
Exactly. Sticky notes. So
yeah.
Why is storing payment? Talk to us about why storing payment information is such a serious issue and more so from a compliance and a risk standpoint.
Well, you mentioned spreadsheets, right? So the problem with spreadsheets, and yes, you're right, a lot of offices do this, or they even have a binder with all the documents and the credit card information. The problem with spreadsheets and any other systems like that is that they were not designed to handle sensitive payment data. And so they don't have any encryption, so there's no passwords. In Excel, you could set a password, but even at that, it's not the right encryption. There's no controls because everybody can have access to that. There's no audit trail, so nobody knows who accessed the data when. And there's also no compliance safeguards. So those are the main issues with having some of these systems that shouldn't even exist anymore with all the technology that we have nowadays.
Yeah, I think, those are some really big points because obviously, one of people's biggest concerns is the security of their information. Talk to me about what the potential consequences are that people may not realize that they're even exposed to by doing that. I mean, I don't think that people have bad intentions, right? But outdated processes have evolved, and talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so no, it's not necessarily bad intentions, but things do happen, right? So I'm sure most of us have received an email at some point where it says, hey, there's been a data breach and we're required to notify you. And so the issue when there's any potential or any actual data breaches is that there could be regulatory penalties assessed by the government. There could be also any chargeback disputes, to the practice. But most importantly, there is a reputation damage, right? So the patient is going to be upset because you did not protect their data. Think about somebody who you fired, and if you had all that information in just a binder just laying around, they have access to that. Who knows what they could do, right? Also, keep in mind that if you are running payments, you are supposed to have PCI compliance. And so that requires that you have all these systems in place to protect that data. So having spreadsheets and sticky notes is not allowed. And so that's going to be also a big issue if you were to have any sort of data breach. Even when staff have the good intentions, a single spreadsheet that's saved to the wrong drive, emailed internally, or emailed to the wrong person, or accessed from any personal device, that is already a compliance violation. So it's just a headache that can be easily avoided.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. So Daniel, we talked a little bit about like current processes and how those work and what we usually see. But I want to flip this over a little bit and talk about new things, right? New processes and workflows. So when a practice does modernize its payment workflow, what do you feel changes first? Is it the revenue consistency, staff stress, or is it just the overall patient experience? How does that look?
I think I'm going to go with staff stress because whenever I've seen offices, right, that it's that time of the month when they are supposed to start calling the patients whose payments failed. then they don't want to do it because it's an uncomfortable conversation to have. And so by eliminating and by having something automatic, staff stress is going to decline first. Then very quickly after that, we're going to see that revenue becomes more consistent as well. Within a few payment cycles, the doctors are going to notice that there's a little bit of a higher deposit because now it doesn't matter if the patient is coming in monthly to pay or to have their appointment. We are going to start collecting monthly payments. So what that's going to do is going to increase the revenue as well. And now because we're not upsetting patients and going after them because their payments didn't go through or because, we simply need to collect the payment, but they didn't come to their appointment, then they're going to, by eliminating all of that, they're going to have a better patient experience. And so that's also going to improve because we're going to have systems that are clear, predictable, and frictionless.
Awesome. That's really good. So how would you say that automation helps solve all three of the issues we've talked about previously, including follow-ups, what do we say, merchant fees, and then the compliance?
Well, the reason why automation works is because you are centralizing all the responsibility into one system. And by the way, these responsibilities nowadays cannot be put on a person. If we have all the systems in place to make it happen automatically, we should do that. So on the follow-up side, automation is going to ensure that the payments are scheduled up front. They are monitored continuously. They're going to be flagged automatically. And even the systems nowadays can even send out like text messages or email reminders to the patient, letting them know, hey, by the way, your payment didn't go through. Can you please provide a new account? So all that automatic follow-up is going to help us remove the staff from having to do all these manual tracking that we currently do.
Awesome. Oh, I like to mention here, kind of a little break point. That's exactly why, we here at MConsent built the ortho payment workflows to help handle the reoccurring payments, the automated follow-ups, and then also the secure document storage, I guess, if you will, in one single place so that teams aren't juggling all of those systems. And it's important to mention that our solution was shaped and help shaped, I guess, if you will, by Daniel as an expert with his real world orthodontic expertise and your financial expertise as well. So
yeah, and so Zach, one of the things that I liked about the system that was designed was the fact that we can actually be upfront with the patients and gives the practices the ability to clearly define what our options are going to be in terms of payment. And so we can remove some of those merchant fees from the doctor and put them somewhere else to where, after having those follow-ups, now you can work on the merchant fees, and the compliance risk is going to be also eliminated basically because of the systems that we created now. So I'm really excited about those systems. And for those of you listening and watching, definitely get a demo because it's going to change the way you operate in your practice.
Absolutely. Well, perfect. Daniel, for practices that are listening today, they're thinking, maybe this sounds familiar, but changing systems feels overwhelming, right? I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
What's the first step that you recommend they take to clean up without disrupting their entire office? I think that's the biggest thing is interruption. What's the first step?
Yeah, I would say start with centralizing the payments in one platform. Definitely do not tackle everything at once because that's going to be very overwhelming and you can, break any systems that you have. So just move recurring payments to a secure automatic system. And that single change is going to immediately reduce the risk and the workload that the practice has. So start with that. And I'm big on cash flow. I keep repeating that word because it's something that practices rarely understand and that it can kill a practice. But once you centralize and automate all these payments, your cash flow is also going to increase very fast.
Absolutely. And I'm big on this, but from your standpoint, for a growing ortho practice, how important is it to fix the payments early on instead of waiting for that first problem to show up?
Well, it goes back to what I was mentioning. It's critical to address the payment system early because the payments are going to be linked to your cash flow. And so if you are a growing practice, those expenses can quickly add up, right? So if we have a practice who is getting more patients because they're doing more marketing, for example, so we're going to need additional staff, perhaps some temps, perhaps hiring somebody else. We're going to also need to buy more supplies, and typically brackets buy in bulk, right? So we might have to pay more upfront to get all those supplies into the practice. And so if those payments are not keeping up with the pace of growth, your margins are going to be really squeezed and the practice is going to appear busy, but on paper it's not going to be as profitable. And so we always worry about profit, but if you're growing, you're going to need the cash flow to keep up with the growth.
Absolutely. Last thing, Daniel, I would say that this entire webinar was a big piece of advice, but if you could give orthodontists one piece of advice to reduce their financial stress this year, what would that be?
That's a great question. I think I would say to stop relying on people to manage what systems should handle. So as we're talking about payments, when payments are automated, secure, and transparent, financial stress is going to drop dramatically. So it's going to be for everybody, for the staff, for the owners, and even for the patients. So stop relying on people to manage what systems can handle.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel, so much. A really good conversation. Obviously, talking about the follow-ups, the quietly draining profit, without being able to see it, and then also the compliance issues. Modern workflows can definitely help with all three of those things, and we've seen that proven. So for anyone that is listening that would like to learn more about MConsent and how MConsent supports orthodontic practices with secure automated payment workflows, Make sure you guys check out the links in the resources there, as well as visit mconsent.net. Daniel, thank you again for joining us and everyone for tuning in and listening. I'm going to go ahead and pass this back over to Amna to close us out.
Thank you, Zach.
Thank you so much for that, Zach. And Daniel, thank you so much as well. That was a wonderful discussion. It's always good to hear from an expert, especially when you hear about these things from the clients and, they make sense, but your perspective shines so much more light on it. Really, really productive conversation. Thank you for that. And for everyone who joined us today, just to quickly recap, we did cover why long-term orthodontic payments need structured follow-ups, how the emergent fees add up over multi-year treatment plans for you guys, the compliance risks actually of manual and spreadsheet-based tracking, and how that can affect your practice as well. And then how automation can actually help you simplify payments and reduce stress for your teams as well. So really great hearing all of that from you, Daniel. I am going to take a minute here and open up the floor for any Q&A. If anyone has a question, our team would be more than happy to address and help answer any queries from you guys. So if you guys do have a question, please feel free to post them in the Q&A section, and we will be more than happy to answer. I'm going to give everyone a minute to do that. And also, please feel free to actually go through the resource section and utilize the links there. You should be able to book demos, and you should also be able to get more information about a newsletter and different social media platforms there. Let's see. Does anyone have a question?
Amna and Zach might be able to help answer this one. What are our credit card fees?
Yeah, great question. So I'll go ahead and jump in and answer that here. So from the feature side of the credit card fees, there's really two ways that that's going to work. The main one is the ability to be able to pass those fees along. When passing those along, you're looking at a 3% rate. If you weren't to be passing those along, which was one of the things that we were talking about as a big benefit of not losing that $90,000, rate that Daniel made an example of, you'd be looking at 2.3 to 2.7%, depending on which rates that you're set up with.
Which, by the way, those are really good rates. If you haven't compared with other vendors, that's kind of like on the low side.
Hopefully that answers that question there. Feel free to chime in if there's anything or any clarification on that.
Zach, maybe you can help answer this as well. Is it legal and compliance to actually process credit card processing fees to patients?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of that stuff is taken care of through the merchant, and we make sure that everything is compliant before, of course, rolling any of this out to our potential clients or our current clients or anything like that. So all of it is taken care of. It is legal, and it is a way that you can pass those fees along. One thing to think about, maybe Daniel can spread some light on this, but being able to pass that 3% along over the course of, hundreds of patients, for example, opposed to taking all of those on yourself as a single practice, is the idea of being able to essentially spread that along. And I think Daniel may have talked about this a little bit, but all of us, as we go into, every store or business out there, right, there's fees that are associated. We just don't see those as consumers. They're just kind of baked in. So it's really not much different than that.
Okay. Do you have anything to add to that?
I want to add a little bit on that. So it's not necessarily that they are baked in, because what we want to do is we want to be explicit about the things that the practice is doing. We're actually required to do it that way. And so there's only a few instances in which you're not allowed to pass on those fees. For example, it could be debit cards, and it could also be the flex spending accounts. So those, the clinic or the office, the practice is going to be responsible for those. But again, as Zach mentioned, this all goes back to how the merchant is setting up the accounts, the legality within the state that you're in. So every state is going to vary a little bit, but for the most part, everything is allowed to be passed on as long as you are disclosing all of that up front. And that's why you see like a little note on the terminals whenever you go to the gas station or whenever you're about to pay your bill online, that it says, hey, there's a fee that is going to apply for this transaction for using this card. You're welcome to use a different type of payment, like a check or cash, or some offices are even offering to accept Zelle payments. So So as long as we disclose it all up front, it's all good.
Yeah, and that's a really good clarification. I think that, I guess when I say baked in, to clarify, right, I'm talking about as a consumer going out to normal. So thanks for clarifying that, Daniel. And then also to answer the follow-up question here, all credit cards are accepted, including American Express, Discover, Visa, MasterCard. So there's no worries about any dependencies on one or two specific credit cards.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But I am a bit interested in knowing, won't passing fees to patients hurt satisfaction or just generally case acceptance overall?
I'll take on that one. So yeah, most doctors are gonna think that. And again, I had mentioned that perhaps if this was maybe 5-6 years ago, it might have been right. Consumers were probably gonna be upset. But we've seen that the industry has slowly transitioned into, I guess, training the consumer to be okay with paying that extra fee. And so I think the moment is right for dental practices to start following that trend, because it's here to stay. Practitioners don't want to be hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on their size of the practice, right? Just because We don't want
Definitely.
to upset a patient. And it
Hmm.
goes back to patients will be upset if you don't tell them
Hmm.
upfront and if they
Yeah.
feel like we are being dishonest with them. But
Yeah.
if we're being upfront, if we're explaining our
Hmm.
process, if we're giving them other options, they'll be
Hmm.
totally fine. And that's what we're seeing with offices who have started passing on those fees.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, transparency helps in all cases, especially when you're dealing with something like this, you know. But like for someone, like if, you know, I talk to doctors and these offices all the time, and a lot of the times they're actually just concerned about their staff, you know? So what if someone's
Yeah.
staff is actually uncomfortable having these kind of conversations? That's very
So
usual.
So I I laugh because I feel like the staff will be more opposed to the fee than the actual patient. And the reason why
Yeah.
is because we don't like change, right? If we're set on our ways,
Hmm.
we don't like change, we don't like
Hmm.
confrontation. And so
Yeah.
even if there's like a few patients who are going to complain, we do not,
Hmm.
as a front, like we do not want to have those conversations. And I think it's
Hmm.
just all a matter of training and scripting. So we
Hmm.
can, prepare the front to tell the patients, these are our new policies, we're doing it for these
Yeah.
reasons, these are the
Hmm.
options. And as long as we can train them to have that open conversation with the patients, they're going to be
Hmm.
okay. Yeah, sure, there might be one or two who never want to come back, but in the
Hmm.
long run, it's going to be less expensive to let of those go than to keep
Yeah.
paying a lot of money in merchant fees.
That is true. I mean, when you say it like that, it makes absolute sense. So thank you. But you know, one thing, it was actually coming to my mind while you were talking as well. People are not always comfortable with change. You know, it's
Yeah.
uncomfortable sometimes, and you're not able to look at the bigger picture of what the long-term benefit is going to be like. But for this specifically, do you think would you define it as a short-term trend, or do practices actually need to change?
It's here to stay. And again, it's been a slow
Hmm.
transition. We started seeing the passing of the fees, the merchant fees to the consumer slowly, and everything's moving in that direction. Like even when we build our own clients for accounting services or whatever it is, like consulting,
Hmm.
management, all of that, we pass on those fees, and they're okay with
Yeah.
it because they understand
Hmm.
that it's the cost of doing business. And us as a business, it's better to
Hmm.
be upfront and pass on those fees and let them know you
Yeah.
can. If you want to avoid the fee, sure, you can
Hmm.
send us a Zelle or you can give us a check. We will accept all kinds of payments, but
Yeah.
you know we have to pass them on. It's expensive.
I mean, absolutely, absolutely. But thank you so much, Daniel. That was really insightful. I think if anyone has any reservations about this kind of process, your understanding and your knowledge about it is going to help them understand that this is actually going to be beneficial for their practices in the long run. So thank you for that. I do want to see, let's move forward. I'm actually really interested in informing you guys about our next session. So always excited to bring a new stuff for you guys as well. So before we wrap up, I do want to share about what's coming. So our next community connection session, it will focus on Zaha AI. We are going to explore how AI-driven tools are transforming patient communication, workflows, and operational efficiency. The registration details will be shared very soon, or as I said, in the resource section, you have access to sign up for our newsletter. If you sign up for our newsletter, you will be getting automatic updates. And if anyone is interested in learning more about how mConsent supports the orthodontic practices with secure automated payment workflows, you'll find resources and steps linked in the resource section as well. So please feel free to access that, and you guys should be able to get more information. And also, since this is our first session of the year, we ended at a very wonderful note last year as well. But looking ahead to 2026, I do want to inform you guys about what mConsent is actually investing in. So we are very focused right now on expanding our insurance concierge capabilities. As you heard from our team today, we are also very focused on enhancing flexible and compliant payment plans. There will be continued development of our Zaha AI platform. And also, there's a broader MTP framework transformation. We are working with our teams to better support scalability, automation, and compliance as well. So all of these initiatives actually are focused on making day-to-day operations simpler and more predictable for practice teams. And we're very excited to bring all of this stuff to you guys as well. And we'll keep having these sessions to make sure that you guys are informed about this. For anyone who would like to follow us and stay up to date on future community connections, podcast updates, educational resources, we invite you to access the resource section and access the social channels that we have. Links are shared in the resource section as well. We'd love to stay connected and continue the conversation beyond today. But saying all of that, I do want to thank all of you so much for joining today's session, to Zach and Daniel for the wonderful conversation. We hope to see you in our next session. Thank you for your time. I hope everyone has a good day.
Thanks
Thanks,
so much.
everyone.
Take care.